All right. Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Tonight is Thursday, September 12th, and we are monitoring the progress of potential Tropical Cyclone 9 that has been advised now by the National Hurricane Center as of 5 p.m. this afternoon, which is our disturbance down here in the Bahamas. So, if you remember, we talked about this morning. This was the wave that was supposed to move across South Florida into the Gulf as a rainmaker, but it sort of misbehaved. It collapsed over here and reformed back off to the east, and it kind of missed its friend over here, which is this big upper level low that's churning up the upper levels of the Gulf of Mexico, and now is now forecast to move towards Florida in some capacity as a tropical storm going into this weekend and early next week. So another week, another storm, as it is this time of year, and as we are expecting, this storm season is picked up and will stay busy. So this is what we're looking at here this afternoon. So we're starting off with your water vapor satellite because this is kind of highlighting our features pretty well. So like I said, your big players here are your upper level low that's imparting a lot of southwest wind shear on the storm. This is kind of churning it up from the bottom, and that wind's coming down from your bottom left to top right across the storm, which has kind of kept this thing very lopsided. You see this definite line right here. The circulation center is actually somewhere like this, but all the activity is blown off to one side of the storm, which is common when these things get started. You also see some of these yellows in here as dry air rotates around this upper level low from a high pressure that had just moved offshore. So this was a drier high pressure that came off from the continental U.S. and it has a lot of dry air in it. You can see this kind of train of dry air coming around through the low and then back into the storm. So it's got some dry air and it's got some wind shear. So right now, our friend here in the Bahamas is nothing more than a tropical wave producing some thunderstorms, but it doesn't have a great environment. So right now, it's just simply a potential tropical cyclone. Now, what is a potential tropical cyclone? What is this? If it's confusing, that's well because it is confusing. National Hurricane Center uses this phrase, potential tropical cyclone, when they want to put out advisories or really watches warnings, which are within 48 hours. Tropical storm warnings, tropical storm watches are within 48 hours for conditions to occur, and the tropical storm warnings are when the conditions are expected within 36 hours. But if the storm hasn't formed yet, they need to call it something so they can start advisories on it and start the watches and warnings on it. So what they do is they slap a potential tropical cyclone on it. Think of it as even lower than tropical depression, one step below tropical depression, which should be nothing, but we kind of have this like point 0.5, if you would, solution where it's not quite nothing, but it's not quite something yet. If that makes any sense, which I know it doesn't because it shouldn't because it doesn't. But anyway, it's not a tropical depression yet, but it's very close to being one. It's more semantics and more waiting on a few little check marks. It's very close to a tropical depression. They might as well just call it that. But it will become Tropical Depression 9 very soon, within the next probably 12 hours to 24 hours. And then by tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow evening, we will have Tropical Storm Humberto on our hands as it moves to the northern Bahamas. Unfortunately, right now it's going to be moving over a lot of the same Bahamas that were absolutely devastated by Dorian, including Mars Harbor and Grand Abaco and the islands there, which really sucks. There's people living there in makeshift shacks and wherever else they're living, which that sucks. But thankfully, this thing won't be a big monster. It's just going to be a lot of gusty wind and some heavy rains for the area. But we do expect the storm to move generally northwest over the next few days. It's going to be guided by high pressure to its north and low pressure. The low pressure over here will be moving away and dissipating while high pressure dominates to the north, which will force this system generally in this northwest motion. We can also see this again on satellite presentation. You can see right here how the canopy of these clouds kind of make a V. See how they kind of make this V shape? High pressure is sinking to the north, forcing it this way, and then the upper level low is kind of kicking it back towards this way. So that's the kind of mean motion. It's going to be generally a north-northwest motion. The biggest question tonight is where exactly does the center of circulation form up? When we're looking at these things, they're not developed yet. Our models have a very, very hard time forecasting them because if you don't have a center yet, you don't really have a point to launch off of. So every model has to guess, okay, I think it's going to start here and go this way. And then some other model says, I think it's going to be here and go here. And then one model thinks, oh, it might actually be over here. And then each of them make their own cones based off that, and that's how you wind up these solutions that go all the way from Cuba to New York. That's why, because there's no uniform starting point. It's like if I started a car race, but everyone started randomly somewhere on the track. You'd be like, okay, well, how do I tell who's winning and whatever else? So it's kind of the same idea. Right now, we know that the winds in the surface generally out of the northwest or northeast in this direction and southwest in this direction. This low level circulation center is kind of like this. It's oblong shaped and it's due to a product of the wind shear. But in the upper levels, your upper level circulation is more over here, more in the mid levels, I'd say. So what happens is the storm is kind of leaning right now. The circulation centers are here and here. They're kind of leaned off as the upper level winds are kind of blowing them off. So until the upper level winds begin to rotate to a little more favorable direction, which they will, the low pressure is moving away. So the winds that are currently directly over the system like this will shift to like this, and then they'll shift to like this, and then they'll shift to like this. So as that happens, the storm will be more enticed to move this direction, and the wind shear will become less of a factor. When it does, generally you'll see this circulation center move off with it, and the storm will form some kind of consolidated center, probably somewhere in here. Levi Cowan on Tropical Tidbits, he broke this down really well. He talked about a little more into the science of it. So if you want to get a little more into the weeds of it, check out his video as well. But generally, he's on a good idea and a good point that we'll see a circulation center probably somewhere in the middle. But until that forms, our models are not going to be very clear. There's really two camps tonight, though, for our models. The GFS essentially sees the system as very weak, which would drift it further west. A weaker system will drift further west. A stronger system will be more enticed to turn north. So the GFS sees a very, very weak system that drifts across Florida and into the Gulf as nothing, really, as a tropical wave just making rain, while the ECMWF, which is the European model, develops a much stronger storm, as you can see it right here, and then moves it offshore of Florida, but very close, similar to like a Dorian or a Matthew or something, coming very close to Florida, but not directly making landfall. The Hurricane Center took the middle ground, and they said, okay, well, if that's that and this is this, then we're going to put our track in the middle and landfall about a 50-mile-an-hour tropical storm right into south central Florida, and then move it up here. Here's what I think. The GFS is probably too far out to lunch, but the GFS is telling us something. Typically, when the models disagree like this, they're typically both are trying to tell you something. The European tells us that at some point the system will turn more north and it will try to go up that direction. The GFS tells us that, hey, this thing may not be developing as fast as some other models think, and to kind of keep an eye on that because there is a good amount of dry wind shear, but there's also dry air. You can see the dry air all in train down here, and the system, as it spins up and tries to develop, will gulp in some of this yellow you see down here. So it's not a foregone conclusion this storm is going to just blow up massively in a hurry, but we do expect some gradual strengthening over the next few days. Taking the middle ground to that, I think this is actually not a bad idea. But what we do know is this: the system is going to develop roughly over the next day or two. It's going to move through the northern Bahamas, and it will be somewhere near the Straits of Florida, or the Gulf Stream, sorry, which is between the Bahamas and Florida, on about Saturday morning. From there, if the storm is stronger and it's a little more north, it's more likely to turn and go offshore. If it's weaker, it's more likely to drift into the state itself. And there's also obviously solutions in between that bring it almost directly onshore of Jacksonville as a bit stronger tropical storm, or very weak and goes a little bit further south. Regardless of, it is going to try to move north, and then there's going to be some kind of stall. This is a 3-day cone. If I turn on the 5-day forecast, notice how it doesn't really go anywhere. It just sort of stalls in the Hurricane Center's idea over North Florida. But I tell you, the stall could be more like this too. It could stall offshore. It could go onshore and move up into southeast Georgia and stall over here. But generally, it's going to stop somewhere right here. We believe high pressure is going to move in and block this thing from getting too much further. And it's probably going to hang out somewhere. So regardless of what winds up happening with this, heavy rainfalls in the forecast regardless. This is the 5-day outlook from the Weather Prediction Center. We're already talking about rainfall totals in the 5 to 7 inch range for northeast Florida and most of northern Florida, looking at least a couple inches of rain. And if the storm were to come on shore and just stall as the Hurricane Center's forecast holds, this would go up significantly. Now, if the storm is offshore, these rainfall totals go down significantly because you take this whole blob and you just move it off to the right. So the rainfall totals are still up in the air, but the many solutions that tell us that the storm does stall near the coast or onshore tells us that a lot of rainfall is forecast. Winds are going to be a little more determinate. What I would say is tonight, everyone in Florida, I would say from probably Broward County, somewhere north of Miami, all the way up the coast, should be preparing for a tropical storm. A tropical storm could impact you sometime late Saturday or on Sunday. That's what I will tell you right now. It could be strong. It could be a 60 to 70 mile an hour tropical storm if it really gets its act together. Now, it doesn't seem like it's going to be quite that strong, but it definitely could. Things do change. You're in the cone of a tropical storm. You should expect a very strong one until otherwise told, right? So that's probably going to be your biggest thing as far as wind is concerned. Surge wouldn't be too horrible because it's not going to have enough time to be a real powerful, large fetch surge maker like a big hurricane would be that has a 100, 200-mile wind field to like really drag a whole bunch of water on shore. But near where the center would come ashore, if it was a 60, 70 mile an hour tropical storm, it would be significant. And don't forget about the tornado threat and the rainfall threat that's going to be out ahead of the storm. So tonight it's kind of a watch and wait. I would say anyone in Florida along the East Coast needs to be expecting tropical storm conditions. Maybe not Miami and the Keys, but anyone else, West Palm and northward, including Jacksonville. And then be prepared for probably significant shifts as this thing does come together tomorrow and our models kind of lock on to what we're seeing and what we're doing. We should know a lot more and be able to tell you a much more concrete idea of what this thing will happen, what might do. But I'm telling you, this thing could be in our hair for a little while. If this thing does go offshore and stall, we're going to be talking about it late into the week. The Carolinas, you're going to have to watch it. If it decides to stall and then try to get going again with a second kick, maybe it stalls and a cold front grabs it and moves it on shore. Maybe it goes up here and then gets that kick and then it moves back into the coast. There's a lot of things that could happen beyond this 4 or 5 day cone. So, get used to saying Humberto for a while because it could be a thing down the road. But for right now, we just need to know that a lot of rainfall is forecast for Florida. Tropical storm conditions are very possible this weekend in Florida, anywhere along the East Coast. And it's just going to be a matter of hammering out the details and seeing where exactly this thing forms up and how it behaves from there. So that's the expectation tonight. We'll know more tomorrow and we'll be able to give you a better idea what's going on tomorrow. So that's what I got for you this evening on this one, guys. Please take it seriously. Tropical storms are no joke, and if it is a strong tropical storm moving very close to Jacksonville, it would be about as bad as Irma and Matthew were, and it would definitely be worse than Dorian was. But obviously, anywhere south or further offshore changes that expectation massively. So don't get too caught up in the details right now. Just be ready for a tropical storm this weekend and go from there. So that's what I got for you guys this evening. As always, thanks for watching and have a good one.